Hello everyone, welcome to this month's webinar. The topic for today's webinar will be selecting files for backup. This is a support-based webinar where we'll go through some information and allow for some Q&A at the end. So, quick introduction. My own name is Untitled. I do all the technical training here, both internally and externally for Mozy. So the breakout of today's session, generally we're going to do a quick 10 minutes PowerPoint presentation to cover the topic. We'll then go through a walkthrough of the things we've covered in the topic, and then we'll leave some time open to any questions or answers you may have that are relevant to the topic being presented today. If there are any problems with viewing the screen or any audio issues, please just pop a note into the chat and we'll get that resolved. So for an overview of today's session, we're going to be looking at selecting files for backup, backup sets, and the file system tab. So what we're looking at here is, I suppose, in terms of selecting files for backup, what's the best stuff to be backing up, what stuff are not necessarily needed to be backed up, and then the benefits, I suppose, pros and cons of using backup sets, and then the file system tab. In terms of some definitions as we're going through to today, I suppose desktop and server are two user types available for Mozy Pro customers. So a desktop user can only back up a desktop operating system, whereas a server user can back up a desktop operating system or a server operating system. So the reasoning behind that is that obviously, you know, some home or some users may have a desktop and they may have Windows Home Server installed on that. So the main differences, I suppose, between a desktop and server user is obviously the operating systems they can be installed in first and foremost, but also with a server user you can back up network shares, you can back up VSS specific backup sets for Exchange and SQL Server and so forth. So these are two user types, and just as I've mentioned them here because I may allude to them later as we're talking throughout the session today. So moving into what files should you be selecting. So this is a tricky one for anybody to tell you, I suppose, and I wouldn't begin to answer this question, which is often put to our support teams by end users, by people doing support themselves, and even by some of our new hires. What should they be telling customers to select for backup? That's a very difficult to tell anybody, because you never know what's the most important files to an individual. So what's important to me may not be important to you. If I'm working in marketing, then images, videos, those kind of things are probably the most important things to my day-to-day work. Whereas somebody in finance, things like Excel, accountancy software like QuickBooks, they're the most important things because that's what they're interacting with on a daily basis. Some of the most common, I suppose, critical files are things like Word documents for most desktop users, images, videos, Excel files, as I mentioned, QuickBooks, PowerPoint presentations. Things like these are the most common, I suppose, files that most desktop users would have in a working environment. Those in, I suppose, business environments as well may have things like Visio and maybe project management software that they're using. And that would be the most important stuff for them to be backing up. in terms of making a suggestion to any individual person and what they should be backing up, I think the best thing to identify what you need to back up is to answer the simple question, what would you need to be able to do your job if I was to take your laptop off you? So in the scenario where your laptop either crashes, if you should be in an unfortunate scenario where it gets stolen or something along those lines, and you don't have that data anymore, what is it that you need to be able to continue to do your job? So if we were to give you a brand new laptop right now, what files do you need on there to start to do your job straight off the bat? So that's probably the easiest way to get somebody to start thinking about what files they're supposed to be selecting for backup. In terms of what files should I not select for backup, again, this is another debatable scenario. You could, for what's not important to one person, or things that should be backed up by one person, are not necessarily things that need to be deselected from a backup for the next person. But common things for everybody that are kind of, I suppose, they bear no benefit, I suppose, to being backed up, are things like system files. Because if you're backing up system files, these are files that are going to be on your next computer anyway. And in fact, restoring system files and trying to push them onto a new machine could actually cause some corruption, because you'll have all those system files on the new machine that you get already. Things like programs that are downloaded from online. In that scenario, I'm talking about common ones, things like, I suppose, that a lot of people would download via internet browsers, things like Chrome and Firefox. These are softwares that you can easily access online and download, or for, that you could easily put onto a new machine if you needed to, and you would get the latest version. Whereas if you were to, say, for example, back up a Chrome executable that you downloaded last year, and halfway through 2016, you're replacing your machine and you're getting a new machine, and you restore your files from Mozy to your desktop, and you go to reinstall Chrome using that executable, you're now using a version of Chrome that's over 1.5 years old. So it kind of defeats the purpose of backing up those type of files. And the last one then is supposed to be non-critical files. Files that you really do not need to back up, I suppose. Files that you don't really use. I mean, for example, for me, I would have, from doing trainings, I'd probably have a lot of exercise pads and notebooks, like TXT formatted files that people have submitted exercises to me that I may not have deleted yet, but they're still on my machine. They're not critical files to me. If I was to get a new machine, I don't need those files to do my job. They're probably files that I can remove off my computer, but I haven't got around to it. And they're probably ones that I could do without backing up. So moving on then from file selection and identifying what files I should be backing up and should not be backing up, I suppose moves to backup sets. So we have two file selection options in the Windows client, and that's backup sets or the file system tab. Okay, so from Windows point of view, backup sets, they allow you to group specific file types together. So you'll notice if you have your own client open in front of you, or if you had it open in the last few days, you may have recalled that there's some default backup sets created when you install the Mozy software. These include things like My Documents. They include things like PowerPoint. They include things like images, Outlook files, and so forth. So these are the kind of things that are kind of, I suppose, common enough to most users, and it's what a lot of users need to back up from their work machines or from their own personal PCs or laptops. And these backup sets allow groupings of those files. And the advantage of the backup set is that it's searching my entire hard drive. So for example, for me, PowerPoint would be one of the most common things I create and use on a daily basis for trainings and so forth. So for me, the PowerPoint backup set, it selects my entire hard drive, and then it searches for all the various, I suppose, file type endings to include in that backup set. So it goes towards our whole set and forget scenario. And that's the way we like to look at the Mozy software, is that it's set and forget. You select the files that you want to back up once, and you don't need to be constantly going back in and updating it. And backup sets allow you to do that, because if I created a PowerPoint right now and saved it to a far corner of my hard drive, because the Mozy backup set is searching my entire hard drive for the specific file type ending, it will pick it up and it'll add it to my next backup without having me opening up the settings window and going in and individually selecting it. With backup sets, you can do inclusive backup sets, and you can also do exclusionary backup sets. So if there's particular file types or groupings of files or files created on specific dates that you don't want backed up, then you can create exclusionary rules for those files so that they will never be selected for backup. You can also use, for server users, you will have VSS backup sets. And these are for things like Exchange, SQL, and Active Directory. These would be the most common ones where you would have a VSS backup set created. And these are not created by Mozy. They're created by Microsoft themselves. So when we do the initial installation of the Mozy software on your machine, we will scan, if you're a server user, we're going to scan the file system and identify if we have one of these VSS backup sets there. So do you have one of these programs installed? Do you have Exchange installed on your server? If you do, then it's going to have an Exchange writer listed under VSS. And once we acknowledge that, automatically a backup set is created for you to be able to use to back up that Exchange server. The difference between that, I suppose, and selecting the Exchange server from the file system tab would be that with the VSS backup set, what you're actually backing up is databases. Small databases that are created to allow for easier backup of the Exchange server or Active Directory or SQL server, and also for the ease of restore, because all of these services, all these Microsoft services, come with an inbuilt VSS restore option. So they'll give you a wizard to restore the Exchange server or SQL server or Active Directory using a VSS backup. So there are advantages to using that backup set. And we covered, I suppose, in more detail on last month's webinar about the advantages of VSS backups and so forth. And all those webinars are easily accessible on our support.mozy.com website, where we store all of our webinars in the community. So in terms of excluding files, as I mentioned there a while ago, can you exclude files? Of course, yes, we can. We can exclude files if we don't want them to be backed up. But what we do is we create, to do that is an exclusion, to create that exclusion rule, we do what is known in our support teams as an include to exclude. And basically that means that you include everything you want in a backup set and you exclude that backup set from backup. And what we're going to do now in the walkthrough is actually go through the backup set and the file system tab and show you the selection options there. So these are our backup sets. So as I mentioned previously, your backup sets allow you to back up groupings of files. So as you can see here, I have my documents, photos and images, presentations, and so forth. If I right-click down here, I can add a backup set. Okay? What I need to do is give my backup set a name, select the location I want to search in, and then add my rules. Okay? My rules can be anything from file type to size of file, when it was last modified, before, after, or between, when it was created, again, before, after, or between. The file name, I can include files by a particular name, or if it's not a particular name, if it starts with something, if it doesn't start with something, and so forth. I can also do it by folder name. The most common enough one is file type, okay, because it tends to gather together the most amount of, I suppose, files with the least amount of input from, I suppose, rule creation, because the other ones are quite specific. Okay, so what you would be doing here, and if we open up one of the existing backup sets, we'll see. So if I right-click here, I can edit a backup set, and I can see what's being searched for here. So my backup set name is presentation. It's searching my entire hard drive, and it's including all these various file types. So all these potential presentation softwares. Okay? And if there was a specific presentation software that I was using that is not listed there, all I have to do is put in the file ending, put in a space, and put in that new file. So let's say new PowerPoint. So I would just put it in like that, hit OK, and then what would happen is any files with that file ending would get added into my backup going forward. And any files on the machine now with that file ending will get picked up for my next backup. And as I said, the advantage to that is it's truly set and forget. I can create a PowerPoint anywhere on my machine as long as it's in my search location, and it will be picked up for my next backup. So I don't have to open up my settings window every time I create a new file and make sure it's selected for backup. If I had multiple hard drives, I can select the multiple drives. Obviously, in my scenario here, I only have the one drive. But if I was to have additional drives attached, then I could do that also. I would be able to search those in total. They are inclusionary rules, all of these, so that allows me to include particular files into the backup set and back them up. If I wanted to exclude files from backup, then from my backup set here, let's say, call it webinar, select my search location, add my rule. Be careful that you don't select the exclude option from here. Now, we're looking at specifically excluding files from backup. We're saying specifically we do not want files that match this backup set to be backed up ever, no matter where they are selected on the machine or no matter where they could be selected elsewhere. If I use the rule here, exclude, I'm not actually doing that. So when you're creating a backup set, it's best to think of it as a container. And the rules that are here identify what goes into the container. When I say include, I'm identifying the specific files that I want to go into the container. When I select it from the drop-down here, exclude, what I'm saying is that from my search location, I want every file, bar this file type. So if we say MP3, I want every file except this MP3 file in this container. And that's not a true exclusionary rule, because as you see here, it will scan my file system. It's going to return me a backup set that's probably going to be probably about 140,000 files or somewhere in that region. And it's going to present that backup set to me. Now, in that backup set, I'm not going to have MP3 files. So some may say, well, that is a true exclusionary rule. But it's not, because I could go up here to my music, as you see here, and still select those files. All I'm doing when I do the drop down here and exclude, all I'm doing is that I'm saying, in this backup set, I don't want these file types. But I'm not excluding it from my overall backup. If I wanted to do that, I need to come down here to my Options tab and select this one here, Show Advanced Backup Set Features. Okay? If I come back to my backup set window now, right-click on my backup set, I now have this option up here. Files matching this set will be excluded from the final backup set. So, if it's a scenario where I do want to block anybody from backing up MP3 files off my machine, what I would do is I would create my container as I've done here, select the rule to include MP3 files in that container, and then tick this option here. And what that's saying is, put these music files into this container and do not back up this container, which is a true exclusionary rule. And you'll know you've done it correctly when you click off the file here, and you'll see the backup set has gone red. You'll notice on the right-hand pane here, all the files are locked. And if I go into my music, you can see from your music tab now as well here that I've all of a sudden my selection from the music has gone down. And if I scroll down, I'll notice that the files in there can't be selected either. And it would be the same if I went into the file system tab and tried to select from there. So just to quickly run back through that there. So I create a backup set. Okay, so if I right click in the space here, I can add a new backup set. I give my backup set a name. So we'll call it Webinar 2. And I select my search location. Now, if I don't want it to be my entire C drive, I can do that and specifically identify certain folders. I will add my rule. Now, if I select the exclude option from this drop down here, because I'm creating a rule for what goes, when I'm using these rules, I'm creating what goes into the backup set. I'm not creating anything else, I'm not doing anything else with those rules, I'm only saying what's going to go into this backup set. So if I select exclude from my drop down there, I'm telling it, and when I go to MP3s, I'm telling it create a container, put everything from this search location into the container, and exclude MP3 files from it. So that would be incorrect if I wanted to actually block anybody or block MP3 files from being backed up from a machine. And this could be anything. This could be video files, or if you had photo images that you didn't want to be backed up, you could use an exclusionary rule for those too. What you would need to do is go to Options and then the Advanced window, and make sure you have this option selected here, Show Advanced Backup Set Features. Hit Select, come back to your Backup Set tab, right-click on your backup set that you want to either edit, or if you were creating a new one, you just add the backup set. Okay, we're just going to go back to the one we created earlier. We'll edit it. We'll include the files that we want in the backup set, and then the key part then is ticking this option that's now available to us, that files matching this set will be excluded from the final backup. So we've now created a container or a box. We've put our music or MP3 files into that box, and now we've marked that box as one that does not get backed up. So we're excluding it from backup. We're saying any files that match this rule or this backup set will never be backed up. It doesn't matter where you try and select those files from, as long as they're through here, and this is an exclusionary backup set, then the exclusionary rule will always take priority over any inclusion rule. So that's why we term it in support that you include to exclude. Okay, so you're including in your rule the file types, and then you're excluding the actual container from backup. And although that is very kind of, I suppose, it doesn't, when we think about it as humans, logically, it seems a bit off from our logical frame of thought, but this is created in the DOS, I suppose, in Microsoft Logic for their operating system. And for them, this is the way the logic runs. That if you're creating the container, you put into the container what files you want, and then you exclude that container. So if there's any other problems with that, I can come back and again and explain it in more detail, or go back over any parts that are not understood in a moment when we go through the Q&A. So that's just in terms of backup sets. They do allow you to achieve the more set and forget scenario that we look to target with, I suppose, with our backup software. The File System tab, again, just note that in the Backup Set tab and the File System tab, if you select a file in the File System tab, if it matches a backup set here, it will show as selected. If you select files in the Backup Set tab, it will show in the File System tab as selected for backup. It doesn't mean that you're selecting the file twice for backup. It's just showing you in both that it is selected. The thing to be careful of there is that if you unselect a file from the File System tab, it would also get unselected from the Backup Set tab that it's in. If you unselect a file in the Backup Set tab, it will get unselected in the File System tab also. So although it doesn't back up the file twice, it's just used more so to show you that it's selected when you select it in one or the other. The key thing to note about if you're using the File System tab for backups is that what you really want to do is if you're backing up using the File System tab, you want to be sure that you get the little green check mark. Okay? And what I mean by that is, okay, so if we go into the desktop here, and let's select this folder here. If I was to come in here and select these files for backup, okay, the folder shows as selected, 3 files are selected, and they'll get backed up going forward. However, if I'm to add any new files into that folder, then they won't automatically be added to the backups. If I'm not using the backup sets and I'm just using the File System tab, then those files will not get added to the backup. I would have to manually come in and select them for backup. If I want a scenario, if I'm just using the File System tab, and I want a scenario where I want to back up all the files in a folder, and I want any new files that are added to the folder to be backed up also, select the folder like this when there's nothing selected, and you'll get this little green check mark. And if I leave that hover there, it's going to tell us what's going to happen. It's telling us all the items in this folder will be backed up, and any new items in this folder will also be backed up. So again, it gives us that little aspect of set and forget. We're selecting the entire folder. We've got our little green check mark, and it just means that if I was to create another PowerPoint or Word document or any type of document in here, doesn't matter the file type ending, if I was to create it in that folder, it will now get added to my backups. because I have that little green check mark. And if there's files in there that I don't want, but I want any new files to be backed up, I can just, again, select it like this and get the little green check mark and deselect the ones I don't want. I still, the folder goes gray, and the background here, the check mark goes gray to tell me that not all files are selected in the folder, but this little green check mark stays to let me know that any new files I now select will actually be picked up for backup. And if you are using the File System tab and there's particular folders that you use regularly to save your stuff to, and you don't want to use the Backup Set tab, I would always recommend that you get this little green check mark on the folder to ensure that any new files that are to be backed up get picked up. And some might say, but what if I don't want some, like I'm adding, files in there that some of them I don't want backed up and some I do. Well, I would say it's better to back something up and come back and realize, actually, I don't need that backed up and deselect it, than not backing something up and then your computer crashing and you not having access to those files because you never selected them for backup. So sometimes, it might be the scenario where you get maybe a handful of files that you actually don't need backed up when you use the folder or the file system like this. But at least you can come back in at a later date and say, okay, well, I don't need those individual files, and I can actually deselect them. And hit OK, and my backup continues as normal. So the real important one there will be just getting that green check mark if you are using the File System tab to back up your files and folders and using it as your main option for file selection. Adding network shares is there. That would be a feature for any server type users, and you can add your network share there. You input the share path name. If it has a username and password, you would enter that too and hit OK. That will allow you to select your files and your folders on your network share to back up. So that is in terms of the walkthrough. I'll leave the session open now to any questions about what we've covered, or if you have any questions specifically around backup sets or the File System tab for selection. If you don't have any questions, thanks for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. The invite again will continue to be sent out with the Mozy Pro newsletter, so just watch out for that, and we'll have the next session up there. If you haven't joined us previously, we do have a lot of our webinars recorded, and they're hosted on our community page, which you can access through support.mozy.com. I will also be sending the recording of this session to all members and all people who have actually registered for the session as well. I'll send you the link to the recording, which will be hosted with our other webinars. And that should be, you should be receiving that email in the next couple of days after today's session. So again, thank you very much for taking the time, and I'll leave it open to any questions you may have. Hi, Michael. So Michael's question is in relation to doing a similar webinar for the Mac client. Yeah, I will be able to do one. I don't have one scheduled. It's not the one that's scheduled for next month, but I will be doing one. And what I will do is I will email you or actually, you know what? Just give me 2 seconds. I'll just quickly pull up my schedule of webinars here. Yeah, so Michael, I have that in, and it's scheduled for September of this year, where we'll be doing a review of the Mac client. So we would do only one kind of support webinar like this a month, so it'll be September before we do that. But you will find some good, some good tutorials and stuff like that at support.mozy.com around the Mac client as well. No problem, Michael. You're very welcome. Hi, Maggie. So Maggie's question is, does the cost for using Mozy change based on the amount of files you select for backup? So no, you can have as many files as you want selected for backup, as long as it stays under the total storage that you have. So you could have, you could have 1,000 files that make up, say, 15 gigs, or you could have 40,000 files that make up 15 gigs. It doesn't matter the amount of files, it's just the overall storage that matters. So if you have a limit, say for example, you're paying for 50, say you're paying for argument's sake, you're paying for 15 gigabytes, it won't cost you any more money to increase your data usage up to 15 gigabytes. If you start using more data, after you go beyond 15 gigabytes, that's when you'll probably need to purchase additional storage to back up that information. But up to your limit, that should be okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Maggie, for the questions. So we'll leave it open there for another few moments to see if there's any more questions you may have, and we'll see if we can answer them for you here. And if not, again, thanks for taking the time to join me today, and we look forward to seeing you next month for our July webinar, in which we'll be going through the Mozy mobile app for iOS and Android. Okay then, so I don't believe there are any more questions coming forth. If you do have any questions that you may not have thought of now in relation to the topic, and they come up along at a later point, do reach out to me. You should have received my email address when registering. If not, I'll just pop it in there now into the chat. And you can reach out to me with questions in relation to the topic. So say we have recorded today's session, we will be hosting it on our community forum, and once it's up there, I will send out the link to the session. Okay, everyone, thanks very much, and we will see you next month.